Costs Lawyers Training, or ACLT as we're more commonly known. I'm going to start off just giving a brief kind of intro as to the role of the cost lawyer and a little bit about the cost lawyer training course. And then I'm going to hand over to our two guest speakers, who are Vicky Weinrich-Cook, who is Head of Costs at MRN Solicitors in Leeds, and Joanne Powell, who is a Deputy Director at the Government Legal Department. We're delighted they're both able to join us on the call today. Then we will have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you've got any questions that occur to you during the presentations, if you can post them in the chat, and then we will deal with them in the Q&A slot at the end. Okay. So a little bit about ACLT. ACLT is the training arm of the Association of Cost Lawyers, also known as ACL. ACL is the professional association for cost lawyers, and they work to further the cost lawyer profession. Cost lawyers are a regulated profession, and the profession's regulator is the Cost Lawyer Standards Board, or the CLSB. The Cost Lawyer Standards Board itself accredits ACLT training to deliver the Cost Lawyer Professional Qualification. Our course is the only one of its kind if you want to become a cost lawyer currently, and we are the sole training organisation to offer it. So we'd like to think that we know a little bit about training cost lawyers. I'm aware that there's quite a broad mix of people on the call. Some will have already know quite a lot about costs and may already have enrolled on the course or be planning to do so. Some might be completely new to costs and not know so much about it. So I'm going to kind of give a very broad generic introduction to the role of the cost lawyer before handing over to our technical experts who will be able to talk in much more detail. Okay, so you may have heard about costs. You may be very familiar with hearing about costs in the news. I think most of us will have watched the news or read in the papers, talking about legal costs in the media. So behind those headlines, cost lawyers are the legal experts in cost law and practice. So what do? Well, cost lawyers are the expert lawyers in the area of legal costs, law and practice. Legal costs might include the fees paid for legal advice, the costs of bringing or defending court proceedings, or the costs incurred by other parties to court proceedings payable by the losing party. Legal costs can be very high, and the law on legal costs is very complex. Some cost lawyers have a particular specialism, and so they may work solely on behalf of claimants or defendants or only take on legal aid work, while others may deal with a much more broad spectrum of work. Cost lawyers often work with other legal professionals, such as solicitors or barristers. They can be instructed directly by the court, solicitors, members of the public or businesses, or carry out specific work relating to legal costs. Cost lawyers are authorised to undertake specific reserved legal activities, which include the conduct of litigation, the administration of oaths, and the exercise of a right of audience. Cost lawyers represent the interests of their clients and provide legal advice regarding, for example, fees paid for legal advice, e.g. to solicitors and barristers, the costs of bringing a case to court, costs of defending a case in court, costs between the parties in a case, and legal aid and public funding. Cost lawyers have rights of audience, so can represent clients in courts on matters relating to costs. They can also be called as expert witnesses on costs in a legal case. A cost lawyer is an integral part of a case, whichever party is giving the instructions, and as a cost lawyer, you may be heavily involved in the management of the claim from a very early stage, right through to settlement of the claim and to the conclusion of matters relating to costs. So how do you qualify as a cost lawyer? So to qualify as a cost lawyer, you need to complete the Costs Lawyer Professional Qualification, which is a 2-year course run by ACLT. And After that, you need to demonstrate to the CLSB that you've completed 2 years of qualifying experience. Your qualifying experience itself can be taken before, during, or after your CLPQ study. So you don't necessarily have to be working in a cost setting before embarking on the course. But in order to demonstrate your qualifying experience, you do need to eventually have attained that qualifying experience to demonstrate to the CLSB. If you choose to pursue qualification as a cost lawyer, you may get exemptions against ACLT's course for your prior legal studies and qualification. So how is the Costs Lawyer Professional Qualification structured? Well, it's a 2-year course, and the first year kind of covers the kind of legal fundamentals. So you would cover contract, tort, civil litigation, and professional standards and ethics. The second year of the course focuses on the law of costs and the practice of costs, and includes cost pleadings, legal aid, the lawyer-client relationship and funding arrangements, practice and procedure in specialist forums, and costs advocacy. If you have done, for example, the bar course, you may be exempted from the costs advocacy element of the course. You can find more details about that in the exemptions information available on ACLT's website. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over now to Vicky Weinrich-Cook, who's going to talk about her career as a cost lawyer. Victoria is a cost lawyer with over 18 years experience in costs in a variety of specialist fields. She began her career at DLA LLP, dealing with paying party matters, before moving over to the claimant side at MRN Solicitors, where she became head of costs in 2009. Victoria works on a number of case types as a particular specialism in clinical negligence, commercial litigation, and currently heads up the solicitor and client department and is a costs advocate, having represented in the Supreme Court. Over to you, Vicky.
Thanks, Madeline. Hi, everyone. It was a real honour to be asked to speak to you today and just tell you a little bit about my own career story, how I ended up in costs, what it's like to work in private practice, and how the ACL course actually impacted on my own development as a fee earner. So, like most people I've spoken to over the years, it used to be the case that nobody actually set out to get into legal costs intentionally. Lots of draftspeople I've interviewed tend to say to me, it happened by accident, really. I wasn't even aware that it was a field of law that I could go into. And it was actually the same for me. And I think part of that problem seemed to be that there was very little exposure to the idea of legal costs in either education or in employment when I first started. And in actual fact, at school, I was generally more geared towards art and music subjects, and maths and science didn't really interest me at that age at all. But I've been very lucky, I think, in the career breaks that I've gotten along the way. I actually started out life as a records clerk, which was the first job that I got in a law firm. And so that experience allowed me to look around and see what other people were doing in the legal profession. And I started to wonder if I could do those other jobs that were going on around me, such as being a legal secretary, for instance. So I did a bit of practice typing and I got a job at Rayleigh Solicitors in Barnsley doing just that. But I was also learning on the job at the same time and sort of seeing what my colleagues were doing and getting my experience from them. It was only when I wanted to look a little bit further afield to get a better secretarial job that I discovered that costs actually even existed. And I'm going back to the year 2005 now for when all this was happening. It was actually an employment agent who asked me if I wanted to train as a cost drafts person. And I didn't know what it was, but I'd actually thought without a law degree, becoming a fee earner was a door that was closed to me, but it turned out that it wasn't. They were actually going to train me. At that point, I'd attained a degree at Huddersfield University in English. So I'd kind of experimented with crossover using the GDL to convert it into some kind of legal qualification whilst all this was happening. But my career in costs started out, as Madeline has kindly pointed out, at DLA Piper, as they were then, working as a defendant in the insurance department. So I was very lucky to work within a team that was really very supportive, and I got to understand how to draft points of dispute and where to take challenges and the basics in case law. So to actually understand what costs was all about, really. Then decided to try the other side of the fence, and MRN were advertising for a claimant fee earner. So I went there and started to learn claimant work, so how to prepare a bill, whereas before I'd only challenged them. And I found that to be quite a steep learning curve, but working as an external firm rather than in-house, it did give me quite an extremely fertile environment for seeing files in all shapes and sizes, all kinds of retainers and solutions, different time recording systems, working on lots of different case types. And for the first time, more of a focus on client care and relationships, because of course the clients didn't have to send us their work, we had to earn it. So that was a new experience for me. I took on extra responsibility as assistant manager at MRN, and then took over as head of costs in 2009. I was growing the team in the Leeds office and branching out into management responsibilities, staff development, and that's still an aspect of my job that I really enjoy. I still maintain that it's really, it's a great experience to be able to help others to achieve their potential and to give them the benefit of my experience where I can. And so it feels like I'm giving something back in some way. MRN have provided me with lots of opportunities to learn and grow, and eventually I took on advocacy as another facet of that job, starting with detailed assessments, if you can believe it, because cost management hearings weren't even a thing then. Those are, you know, just sort of the mini hearings that we get to deal with now during the life of the case. One of my proudest moments since then was representing a client in the Supreme Court before Master Gordon Saker and Deputy Registrar Ian Sewell. And this was something I never in a million years believed I'd be able to do when I first started out. It happened while I was in the middle of studying the ACL course, actually. So I didn't have higher rights of audience to advocate at anything more than county court level. And I composed an email to the judges, detailed my experience, that I was a student on the ACL course, and I got a really nice response back from them both, allowing me to appear before them. And I fully believe this was on the strength of the fact I was actually an ACL student and the recognition of that course. And whilst I didn't technically have the rights at that level, they were satisfied to allow me to appear before them anyway. And that experience was probably one of the crowning moments in my career so far. But like most things for me, it didn't go exactly as planned. At the end of the first day in court, there was a bomb scare, which was quite unprecedented. The usher threw everybody out of the court, and the police widened the cordon in the centre of London. So by that point, we'd all sort of decided to get a quick drink over the road before we called it a day. And we walked in to find the judges were already at the bar. So we hadn't expected to see them there, of course, but what it did give us is a bit of an opportunity to see them in a different, much more human light. And it definitely helped with my nerves for the next day. Taking on the ACL at the later point in my career, I must admit I was a little bit apprehensive as to what they were going to be able to teach me that perhaps I hadn't already dealt with. And what I found was the course was extremely intensive, and it was packed full of information in the handbooks, the tutorial materials, and that allowed me to spend time on areas of costs that didn't often come into my remit on a daily basis, or to sort of brush up on other aspects in cost law, such as court of protection and legal aid issues. And I wasn't dealing with that very frequently, so there was an opportunity for me to look at that there. The tutorial structures are set up generally remotely on chat rooms every week, and they were really helpful, sort of being able to bounce ideas off the tutor and the other students that are going through the same thing as you are about the issues and the assignments. I found that experience to be quite invaluable. So we all became a mini team, and when the time came for the exams, we'd all support each other. But no matter what you might think, they will get you through these exams. That was the thing that worried me the most. My memory's not what it used to be. and there did seem to be quite a lot to know, but the revision sessions were a revelation to me, and it's something that I've taken into my working life. I also really enjoyed the business management module in the final year, sort of getting you to focus on a business plan for a cost firm and guiding you through the process of how to run a business. And that really helped me to refocus on how my own firm operates and how best to drive our business forward from a financial point of view. And this then helped me again when I became an associate of the firm quite recently, and I was asked to investigate new business ideas and to take the business forward, particularly in light of the new fixed cost reforms coming in. So I was able to draw on that experience the ACL had given me and implement that in a much more practical way. The advocacy module as well allowed me to brush up on those skills. And I think the beauty of being a cost lawyer is that you have the rights of audience when you qualify. So essentially, you get to be the solicitor preparing the case, and you get to be the barrister advocating it at court. So it kind of covers all bases, really. I'm one of those people who has to work quite hard to achieve anything. Academic stuff just doesn't come naturally to me. But my enthusiasm for this course meant that whilst I didn't intend to, I actually won the ACL Cup for getting the highest marks that year, which came as a big surprise to me. But I was presented with the cup by Erica Bedford at the ACL conference, and it was a huge honour and totally unexpected. I think the ACL and the ACLT have done a great deal of work in raising the profile of cost law. And I remember at my portfolio interview at the end of the course, I'd explained to the tutor I'd had my eyes opened as to the value of the course to me, the sheer breadth of the modules and how well structured it was. So I would say to anyone who's thinking about doing the course to absolutely do it. It's not easy, but it does sit nicely alongside your job if you're working in a cost law firm, and you get so much out of it in terms of knowledge and support materials, and the achievements well recognised. For your clients, you become a regulated individual, which builds trust. And the sky's really the limit to becoming the owner of your own cost firm, if that's what you choose to do. So hopefully I've said some helpful things for you there, but that's my career in a nutshell, effectively. And I'll hand back to Madeline. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Vicky. That was tremendously useful, and it's really fascinating to hear other people's career stories and how they came to work in cost. So thank you ever so much.
No worries.
I'm just going to hand over to Joanne Powell now. So I'm delighted to welcome Joanne. Joanne has worked in the cost profession for over 20 years and is currently head of the Government Legal Department costs team. Prior to making the move into costs, she had a career as a litigation paralegal. She trained as a cost lawyer whilst freelancing for a well-respected cost company before moving in-house to a mid-sized legal firm. Thereafter followed a brief stint at another costs company, and she did some freelance, including working part-time as a consultant to the Government Legal Department and running a satellite office for a national costs firm. She subsequently made the move to becoming a full-time civil servant in 2019, initially as technical lead and then as team leader for the costs team. During her time as a cost lawyer, she has been a CLSB accredited trainer and ACL tutor and played a key role in developing training for leading cost software. Welcome, Joanne.
Thanks very much indeed, Madeline, and hello everybody. Yeah, like Vicky, I'm just going to sort of run through my career and how I got into working in costs, and then tell you a little bit about the type of work I do now. Actually, it's interesting because I don't think Vicky and I have ever met before, but our career paths have obviously been similar. I left school at 16 with O-levels as they were then, GCSEs, and I went to a further education sixth form college and did a business studies BTEC, so equivalent to A-levels basically. I then started working for an insurance company, and when I went for the interview, they said, do you want to work in our estates department or our legal department? So I sort of tossed a coin and said legal. And I was put into one of the litigation teams doing basically commercial property litigation, which sounds probably more complex than it is. It was commercial rent collection, Landlord and Tenant Act lease renewals, and also a sort of variety of non-personal injury RTA cases. Classic paralegal type career, ran my own caseload, small, low value claims, lots of minor advocacy. This was back in the days before telephone hearings or any form of video calls. So I was out and about around London in all the local county courts quite frequently. And it was almost entirely on the job training, with some occasional sort of vocational courses from the various suppliers. During that time, I started on my SILEX qualifications, and I did the level 3 diploma equivalent. It was a different structure back in those days, but it was the equivalent of the sort of SILEX paralegal course now. And then following redundancy, I spent about 5 years or so working for various high street firms locally to me and as a litigation paralegal. In one of those jobs, I ran the agency department, whereby we were doing hearings in our local county court for firms all around the country. So I was doing lots and lots of advocacy, really small hearings by and large, but incredibly good experience. And then I got to a point where I didn't really want to be a paralegal anymore, but I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, and I didn't really want to waste my knowledge that I had. And I saw an advert for a costs draftsperson, and I applied, interviewed, and was accepted. I was freelance when I started. I worked for one of the well-respected costs firms doing predominantly claimant work, real mix of stuff, everything from really small legal aid claims through slightly more exciting child abduction cases, through commercial, through court of protection, bit of clinical negligence, quite a lot of personal injury. So a real mixture of stuff. And still doing quite a bit of advocacy, either on my own cases or on those of colleagues if they weren't able to attend hearings, etc. And whilst I was doing that, I got involved with the company Costs Master, which is one of the leading programs for costs drafting, and I helped develop that program. And then in the fullness of time, I started doing training for them and support, etc. And that led me to becoming an accredited trainer, which I really enjoyed. I then got an approach from a high street firm, legal firm, who were sort of expanding their cost department. They were great to work for, really flexible with me. I worked for them full time, but I was still able to do work with Costs Master on a sort of freelance basis. And then eventually, due to family circumstances, I felt I needed the freedom of being freelance again. And I got the part-time position as a contractor with GLD through contacts that I had. I mean, costs is a very small industry, really. So, you know, if you're in it for any length of time, you start to get to know people, you meet them over and over again at various things. So that was how I got the position in the first place. And then after about 5 years working part-time with them and doing other things as well, a full-time job came up for a senior costs lawyer in the team. So I applied for it and was successful. And that, I thought, was going to be sort of the end of the way I would finish my career. At the time, the costs team was part of a bigger litigation team, always had been within GLD. But after a few years, they decided to make us a standalone team, which meant that there was a vacancy for somebody to lead that team. So I sort of felt duty bound to apply, and was very fortunate to get the job. The type of work that we do, working at GLD, I think has been amazing for me. You know, I've found it just so rewarding and enriching. the work is amazingly interesting. So the government legal department is basically the government's principal legal advisors. Our core purpose is to help the government to govern well within the rule of law. We've got nearly 3,000 employees. About 2,000 of those are either solicitors or barristers, and 10 of us are costs lawyers. I head up a team of 20 people, and the other half are either costs draftspeople or sort of administrative operational colleagues. Within the team, we have a real range. We've got cost lawyers at slightly more junior positions. We've got cost draftspeople at more senior positions. It's a real mix of people, and I'm very proud of the fact that we can give that sort of alternative career path within the team. The clients that we work for are pretty much every government department. Our main clients tend to be the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Defence, the Home Office, but we work for all sorts of random people. HMCTS sometimes contact us, the Criminal Case Review Commission, Charities Commissions, all sorts of different people. When I started out in costs, as I said, the work that I was doing was mainly receiving party claimant work. It's now the other way round, in that the majority of the work that we do is paying party. And I think certainly having worked in both sides is really beneficial. I know some people who work in claimant costs think that we're dreadful because we try and reduce the amount that we pay them. I have a slightly different take on it, which is I'm protecting the public purse, which ultimately is all of our tax money that we've paid in. So yeah, that's the reason I do it, really. The work of the litigation group in GLD is very varied. It encompasses both private and public law work. So judicial reviews, very standard personal injury work. We also are involved in supporting public inquiries. We attend all sorts of courts and tribunals, coroners' courts, asylum and immigration tribunals, the Royal Courts of Justice, the Supreme Court. We are effectively the biggest litigation practice in the UK, and we have more cases in the Supreme Court than any other organisation. And the work that we do in the team is really varied. So we do, obviously, as I said, a lot of adverse work. We do a lot of budgets on the private law cases. We also work in public inquiries, so we're not, and I don't think will be, involved in the COVID inquiry because that's been so big that we've had to outsource some of that. But we certainly are currently involved in the Post Office Horizon inquiry and the Grenfell inquiries. We get asked to do quite a lot of random input into policy groups, etc. So during my career, I've been called in to give advice in relation to the coronavirus commercial rent bill, which is about as obscure as you can get, I think. Work in relation to the Good Law Project, the Here for Good people, all sorts of different stuff. So it's really, really interesting, challenging, incredibly busy, but yeah, never boring. As team leader for the team, like Vicky, I'm involved now in the managerial side of things. So having set us up to function as a standalone team, I'm really keen on developing people within the team and publicising the work that we do within GLD, because frankly, a lot of people don't really know about us. We have a very wide client base with all the different departments, and we are recognised within GLD as a centre of excellence. And that is a team who has a recognised expertise in an area of law that has relevance across a number of different teams and departments. What that means is we provide expert input in relation to costs. We create and maintain guidance and other material. We provide updates and trainings to lawyers. We do a lot of that. We take responsibility for considering and publicising any strategic trends or big picture issues in relation to costs, and we sort of coordinate the GLD approach to costs. I also work on wider projects, so I'm involved at the moment in relation to a paralegal pathway, which is aimed at giving better career offerings to paralegals within GLD, and I'm sitting currently on the employer trailblazer group for the Costs Lawyer Apprenticeships. And I've also had to get my head around all sorts of other things, such as procurement work. So we have a panel of cost firms that help us out with our work. And because we're the government, we have to go through a formal procurement exercise every few years to renew the panel. And I've learned a huge amount about that. So yeah, it's been a very varied career. I've never been somebody who really has had sort of career goals as such. I've in some ways probably drifted along through various stages, but what I did find was once I got into costs, obviously it was where I was meant to be. So having gone through some of the other qualifications, having started on the SILEX, never completed it, etc., as soon as I found out about the ACL, I wanted to do that and become qualified. It's changed enormously in the years that I've been involved in costs. When I started, it was more or less a question of being handed a book and told, there you go, study that and you'll do an exam at the end of it. During the time that I was doing it, it did change. We did have tutors, but there was no such thing as tutorials. It was very, very different in those days. And that's why when I started at GLD as a consultant, I was asked by somebody there if I would be interested in being a tutor for the ACL. And I sort of shrugged my shoulders and said, oh, they won't want me. And the person who was asking me said, well, why not? And I said, well, I don't have a law degree. And they went, yeah, but you're a cost lawyer. So I said, oh, well, you know, if you think they'll be interested, fine. And I have to be honest and say that I probably did it as much as anything because I wanted to make sure I knew what cost lawyers are meant to know now, because I felt my qualification was different. But I absolutely loved that. Really, really enjoyed helping students, helping develop them, helping get them through the qualification. And although I don't do that now because of the demands of the role I'm in, I still sort of keep in contact a bit with the ACL and the CLSB. I've invigilated some exams recently, and I've sort of sat on a few sort of test panels, if you like, for the CLSB, you know, just bits and pieces like that, because I'm just so keen that as an organisation and as a profession, we continue to develop and grow. The firm that I trained with in costs, at the time, the senior partner there was the chairman of the ACL. He subsequently went on to become the president of the ACL. So I got really involved with all things ACL quite early on. And he was involved when we were granted rights of audience. And I'm just so proud of the fact that, you know, I am in a profession which, despite the fact many people have never heard of it, is absolutely recognised as being proper qualified legal professionals. You know, we are regulated legal professionals, and even now when I tell other lawyers that, they look very surprised. But, you know, I'm just like the fact that I've been able to get into a career where you can become an expert in a niche area. I think, you know, for me, that's worked really well. So I hope that's been reasonably interesting for you, and I'll hand you back to Madeline.
Thank you ever so much, Jo. That was fantastic and really interesting. It's really interesting to hear the different career stories and the contrasts between them, and yet the commonalities as well. So thank you ever so much. Okay, so I'm just going to touch very briefly, just a very brief overview of the course and how it's run before moving over to Q&A. So as I detailed previously, there's 9 modules taught over the 2 years. You can start the course in September or February. So the next intake is in February 2024. There are exemptions available for previous legal study and qualifications. So typical exemptions are against an LLB, the GDL, the bar course, the LPC, Silex. The full policy document is on our website, so if you are interested in applying, have a look and we can give you more advice. The course is delivered part-time and it's online, so you would have a tutorial for each week that you're enrolled on a module, and then you would have time for private study. You work through the materials online for an online learning environment, and then you have a weekly tutorial. The tutors on our course are either working as cost lawyers, some of them also teach in universities, but they all have industry experience. So you're actually taught by people that are, you know, at the chalk face. So in terms of if you want more information, you can have a look on the ACLT website. You can email us at support@ACLT Training with any queries, and we can pick those up. We have a LinkedIn page, which I urge you to follow, and we also have a Twitter account as well, which you can follow. So I'm going to move into questions and answers. Does anybody have any questions? Stop sharing my screen. Any questions? There is somebody typing, but I'm not sure if they're posting a question or not. Feel free to ask if you have any questions. You can come off onto audio and ask if there's any questions. No? Oh, and someone is.
Looks like Archana is typing, it says.
Yeah, Archana, would you prefer to ask your question rather than typing? Okay, does anybody else have a question that they would like to ask about any of the information that they've heard today? Ah, okay, that's why. Okay.
Vanessa's got his hand up.
Yeah. So if I come to Eunice after Archana, yes, there may be exemptions if you've completed the first year of the old course. If you can get in touch with us after the webinar, we can have a look at what you've studied with us previously and how that maps across to the new course. Eunice, I think, has his hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, what are the benefits of becoming a costs lawyer as opposed to a cost draftsman?
Joanne and Vicky.
Do you want to go first, Vicky?
Thank you very much. I think I was a cost drafts person for a very long time, actually, so I've only been a cost lawyer for quite a small amount of time. But I think for me, just gaining that individual recognition rather than working for an SRA regulated firm and gaining that reserved legal activities by way of agency, I can do that now on my own, in my own right, and that's almost sort of retrospectively underlining the experience that I'd already had. But it also adds an extra layer to the people that you're working with and that you're working for, that, you know, you can undertake these activities and you fully take responsibility for them. So things like representing clients at court, you know, having the advocacy, being able to deal with cost litigation effectively in your own right. Those were the important differences for me. And there were times in my career where I did feel a little bit of, it's probably wrong to say this, but a little bit like an imposter in some respects. You know, I was a drafts person, but I wasn't, you know, necessarily qualified in any formal sense. And so for me, it kind of added that that air of recognition and responsibility. So hopefully that answers something of your question, Eunice. Joe, have you got anything?
No, thanks. Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think as well that, you know, it is absolutely the case that you can do an incredibly good job without being a qualified costs lawyer. You know, I know incredibly good cost drafts people, some of whom have got legal qualifications, not necessarily qualified solicitors, but, you know, they've done law degrees, they've perhaps got LPC, etc. I think the difference is very often it is the way you are perceived. So particularly if you're working in-house, I find, and I've found at other places where I've been in-house, you know, you are seen more as a lawyer unless as a sort of paralegal, I think, if you've got the qualification. And also, I think the breadth of what you study is interesting. So I've recently acted as a supervised practice tutor for somebody who is sitting the exams, who runs his own business, but was not a qualified costs lawyer. And because he didn't employ any qualified costs lawyers, he didn't have anybody who could be his supervising practice tutor. So I've been acting on that regard. And he said something which I think is absolutely right. You can do the job and you can be good at it without having the qualification. What the qualification does is it sort of fills in the gaps, perhaps, you know, and I think often people find that if you've already done a law degree in the LPC, maybe not so much, but if you are a costs drafts person who doesn't have that background, then I think knowing those basic legal subjects that you cover in year one is really important and really valuable.
Thank you both. We've got a question from Shilpa Shah. Are there any continuing practice development requirements post the 2-year course, such as for the solicitor and barrister qualifications? I think this is a kind of question about ongoing CPD.
Yeah, that's right. So yes, exactly in the same way as SILEX or solicitors or barristers have to do continuing professional development, so do we. We have a requirement for 12 hours a year, and we have to, at the beginning of the year, set out our learning goals, which have to align with the areas that we're sort of working with and where we perhaps need to develop ourselves. So mine have changed quite a lot over the last few years because they've gone far more into the sort of practice management side of things now, but I still need to keep my costs law knowledge current in order to do the job. So, there's still an element of needing to make sure I keep up to date with recent case law developments, etc.
It's actually quite easy, isn't it? I think, to keep up, for the opportunities, particularly in cost, to kind of gain extra knowledge, because this area of law changes almost daily, and there's so much to know at any one time that it's not, we're never really scratching around, are we, for things to get hold of and learn about. So yeah, it kind of writes itself, I think, really.
I think
and
as
it
well,
covers
it's a good point to mention that if you do the ACLT course, you are a student member of the Association of Costs Lawyers, which provides a wealth of technical content and continuing professional development for its programs and its seminars and its conferences. And as a ACLT student, you have the benefit of that as part of your course fee.
Absolutely, and the ACL conferences and seminars are a really good way as well to start building or expanding your professional network. As I said earlier, we're a really small profession, and as such, it's really important, I think, and valuable to have that network of cost people. It's always useful to be able to pick the phone up to somebody and say, I've got a question, can you help? That was really valuable to me when I was working freelance, obviously, because I didn't have the sort of law libraries around me that I have currently, but it's still useful now because, we sometimes get strange and wonderful things come up and you think, oh, I know who I can talk to about that. So yeah, no, it's membership of the ACL, I think, is really valuable.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, if there's no more questions, then we will close the webinar now. A huge thank you again to Vicky and Joe for their presentations. And if anyone has, there you are, it's a little message for you. If anyone has any questions that occur to you after this talk, then please do get in touch with the ACLT team via our support email, and we will pick those up from there. If you'd like to apply for a place in February, we're still accepting applications, and then after that the next intake will be in September. But a huge thank you to our speakers, and thank you for your contributions today, and thank you everyone for attending. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Madeline.
Thanks, Madeline, and hello, Archana. Nice to see you. I used to work with Archana.
Oh, it was a lovely comment from Shilpa.